Hello and welcome to this year's World Aquatic Animal Day on the impact of our human activities on aquatic animals. This is a project of the Aquatic Animal Law Initiative in the Animal Law Clinic at the Center for Animal Law Studies at Lewis and Clark Law School in Portland, Oregon. My name is Caitlin Skurky, and I'm a law student and legal intern with the Aquatic Animal Law Initiative in the Animal Law Clinic at Lewis and Clark Law School. My pronouns are they, them. Thank you for tuning into this session on the Whale Sanctuary Project, creating a new future for captive cetaceans. We are extremely excited to have Dr. Lori Marino with us today from the Whale Sanctuary Project in the Kimmela Center for Animal Advocacy. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Marino. Before we dive into this session, Before we dive into this session, some formalities. This session is in Zoom webinar format, so you will not be able to see yourself or other attendees, but only our speaker. You will also be muted for this session, but you can submit your comments and questions as I will explain in a moment. Please note that this session is being recorded. We hope it will be available for view in a few weeks. Links to the videos will be on our website, www.worldaquaticanimalday.org, and on the Center for Animal Law Studies YouTube channel. For any further information about today's events, please check out our website or Facebook page, which you can find by searching World Aquatic Animal Day. After the speaker's presentation, we hope to have time for a brief Q&A. To submit your questions, please use the Q&A box located in your control panel on your screen. If you want to share your attendance at this presentation on your social media, please use our dedicated hashtag World Aquatic Animal Day. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our wonderful speaker. Dr. Lori Marino is a neuroscientist who has studied animal behavior and intelligence for 30 years and was on the faculty of Emory University. She is founder and executive director of the Kimmela Center for Animal Advocacy and president of the Whale Sanctuary Project. Lori is internationally known for her work on the evolution of the brain and intelligence in dolphin and whales, as well as primates and farmed animals. And she has published over 140 peer-reviewed scientific papers, book chapters, and magazine articles on comparative brain anatomy and cognition, self-awareness in non-human animals, human and non-human animal relationships, and the evolution of intelligence. Lori also has interests in bioethics and animal law and policy, and in particular, the intersection of science and law. I'll now pass it over to you, Lori, and I'll see everyone back here for the Q&A.
Well, thank you so much, Caitlin, and thank you everyone at Lewis and Clark and at the Aquatic Animal Institute for inviting me here, and thank you to the audience for joining us. I look forward to telling you about our Whale Sanctuary Project and some of the updates that we have for you. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen. And I hope that everyone can see that. So today I want to talk to you about the future. In keeping with the theme of this conference, the future for creating a new one for captive cetaceans, creating a new future for them. What does that mean? Why do we need to do that? Well, we'll start out with a discussion of the scope of the problem. Then we'll talk about the seriousness of the problem, and then we will finally get to the way forward. When you look at captivity of dolphins and whales across the globe, you see that it really is global. This is a map showing the countries where dolphins and whales, cetaceans, are kept captive, mainly for entertainment, mainly in concrete tanks, although some are kept in small sea pens. If you look at captivity by the numbers, there are over 3,500 whales, dolphins, and porpoises, representing about 10 species and hybrids held in captivity around the world. In North America alone, there are 481 bottlenose dolphins, 80 beluga whales, 22 orcas, and other species of odontocetes, toothed whales, dolphins, and porpoises. In Canada, there are 5 bottlenose dolphins, 50 plus belugas, 1 white-sided dolphin, and 1 orca. And all but the white-sided dolphin are residing at Marineland, Canada. I say 50 plus belugas because we don't really have a good idea of how many have died, how many have been born, but it is between 50 and 55. So I want to turn to the health outcomes associated with living in concrete tanks. There are 3 major areas where we see impacts of living in a confined environment. One is in terms of opportunistic infection. Another is in terms of behavioral illness and abnormality, if you will. And the third is disturbed social interactions. So first, turning to opportunistic infections. Most captive cetaceans die of opportunistic infections. That is, pneumonia and other lung diseases are the #1 cause of death for captive dolphins and whales. But we also see candidiasis and other fungal infections. It's also very common for them to get gastric ulcers and other stomach diseases, as well as encephalitis. All of these diseases are found in free-ranging dolphin and whale populations, but it still begs the question of why they are found with such frequency in captive situations. And in fact, some of these are actually more frequent in a captive situation than they are in the free-ranging situation. So we have a lot of opportunistic infection. We also see a lot of behavioral signs of disturbance. One of the things we see quite a bit is stereotypies, repetitive, nonsensical behaviors, either circling the tank in a very stereotypical way, head movements. And we see this in all animals, including humans, who are emotionally disturbed. We also see a lot of self-mutilation, that is, damaged teeth. For instance, over 60% of all orcas in concrete tanks have damaged teeth. The damage is done when they grate their teeth on hard surfaces of their tank, jaw clap, and do things of that sort. And those teeth become so damaged that they are sometimes worn down to nubs and have to be drilled out in order to avoid systemic infection. There's also been a number of cases of orcas and other dolphins and whales banging their head against the sides of the tank, some cases fatal. On the other end of the spectrum, we see a lot of less energetic behaviors, but behaviors that are more depression-like. For instance, anorexia, going off feed, and also something we call logging, which is just floating on the surface of the tank for a long time, sort of not having any motivation to do anything. So those are the kinds of common signs of mental illness we see. But we also see very disturbed social interactions, hyperaggression towards other orcas, other dolphins, including calves and including humans. In the picture here, you see Nakai. Nakai is an orca who is living at SeaWorld San Diego, and this picture was taken from 2012. The reason that he has that abrasion on his chin is because he got into a fight with another orca, and the other orca caused a big chunk of his chin to just basically come off, and it was floating in the tank. Those are the kinds of things that you see in the tanks that you don't see in free-ranging situations. And the reason is because they don't have enough room to employ natural dispersal mechanisms. So they're all crammed together. There's nowhere to go if they don't get along. And the result is very aggressive events. And of course, orcas have killed several people in the tanks, none in a free-ranging situation. Finally, and a very interesting part of this is the poor parenting that we see. Failure to attach, failure to thrive. There's a very high infant mortality in the tanks. Now, there's also a high infant mortality in the free-ranging situation. There's predation, pollution, all kinds of things like that. But the question then is, what's causing the high infant mortality in the tanks, where there is 24/7 veterinary care, filtered water, all the food that they want? So we see all these things in a closed environment under human care, begging the question of why this constellation of problems. Here's an example of a peer-reviewed study done that looked at some of the dental wear that you see in orcas. Again, at least 60% of orcas have moderate dental wear in the tanks. And last year, my colleagues and I published a peer-reviewed paper in Journal of Veterinary Behavior in which we reviewed the evidence for some of these harmful effects of being in tanks, some of the issues that I talked about just before. We brought all that evidence together from the peer-reviewed literature, and we hypothesized that given this, that it could very well be that chronic stress and the kinds of mechanisms we already know about chronic stress and its impact on the brain and the body could be at the root of all of these opportunistic infections, behavioral and social abnormalities that we see in captive orcas. By the way, here's Kiska. She's the sole orca in Marineland, Canada, and those are what's left of her teeth, which is basically nothing. We also identified 5 major potential sources of chronic stress for orcas in tanks. Obviously, physical confinement, lack of social support, anthropogenic noise, loss of autonomy, and boredom. The result of all this is a short life and a poor survival. And when you look at what I call life and death statistics, no matter what statistics you look at, it doesn't bode well for orcas, belugas, and other cetaceans in captivity. Dolphins, bottlenose dolphins are doing a little bit better than they have, but they're still not doing better than they are in a free-ranging situation. In orcas, the maximum lifespan is 60 to 70 for males, 80 to 90 or more for females. But most captive orcas do not live past the age of 20. For belugas, although we're still finding out a lot about their life history, belugas in the ocean can live as long as 60 years, but they usually die before the age of 30 in marine parks. Here's an example of a recent incidents. This is Skyla. She was 17 years old, and she was a captive orca who was kept at Loro Parque facility in Spain. And just a week ago, she died, apparently suddenly of intestinal torsion. But the fact is that there is now a changing landscape of public opinion and policy. And I want to tell you a little bit about some of the things that have happened in the past 10 years or so that have brought us to this point. Obviously, it all began with a really tragic incident, and that is in February 2010, when the orca Tilikum, who was kept at SeaWorld Orlando, killed his trainer, Don Branchow. And this sparked worldwide horror and interest. And these were the kinds of things that let people know that these are not rare, these are infrequent, but not unheard of events in captivity. Just prior to this, another orca, Quito had killed his trainer at Loro Parque, and Tilikum had killed other humans before. So this kind of hyperaggression is not something that wasn't expected, and it's something that we see in the tanks. 3 years later, the movie Blackfish came out. It premiered at Sundance and was picked up on by CNN. And that movie chronicled what goes on behind the scenes at SeaWorld in terms of orca care, orca well-being, and it opened everyone's eyes to the situation, and really was a watershed moment for the public coming to understand what really goes on behind all the applause and all the entertainment. In June 2019, we had some incredibly progressive legislation passed in Canada. That is Senate Bill 203. And this legislation bans keeping whales, dolphins, and porpoises in captivity for entertainment. It's certainly well ahead of anything we have in the United States, and Canada is again leading the way in terms of banning these shows. And right now, as I mentioned, the only place that really has any dolphins or whales, except Vancouver Aquarium, but they're trying to move their one dolphin, is Marineland Canada. And they are banned from breeding them. They are banned from bringing more in and using them for entertainment. So this is happening all over the world. For instance, just a few months ago, France announced a plan to phase out the keeping of whales and dolphins at entertainment facilities. And so to put in its place an alternative, we have the global cetacean sanctuary movement, because it's not enough to just say these animals should not be living in concrete tanks. You have to provide a feasible alternative for them. And that's what the global cetacean sanctuary movement is all about. And so it has its own more recent timeline. In May 2016, I founded the Whale Sanctuary Project, and we launched with a $1 million donation from Munchkin CEO Stephen Dunn, and they have continued to be important supporters of our work. Shortly after that, the National Aquarium in Baltimore announced its decision to create a seaside sanctuary for its bottlenose dolphins. In February 2020, after 2.5 years of searching for an appropriate site, we at the Whale Sanctuary Project announced our choice of Port Hilford, Nova Scotia, for the creation of a sanctuary so that beluga whales and possibly orcas can be retired from entertainment parks and aquariums. And I'm going to be telling you a lot more about that momentarily. In August 2020, Merlin Entertainments, a UK company, passed a no captive whales or dolphins policy, and they moved 2 of their belugas from a facility in China to a sanctuary environment in Iceland. And in November 2020, we at the Whale Sanctuary Project completed our environmental analysis of the bay at Port Hilford and have applied for permits to create the sanctuary. So things are really moving. Here are where there are some cetacean sanctuaries in existence and in development. As I mentioned to you, National Aquarium, Whale Sanctuary Project in Nova Scotia, one in Iceland. There's also some efforts going on in Europe, Italy, France, Greece, and other places. And over the years, I hope to show you that this map becomes more and more populated with authentic sanctuaries for cetaceans. So let's get to the issue of what an authentic sanctuary is. This is really important because it's not about just taking the animals from a concrete tank and putting them in a sea pen. That is not what an authentic sanctuary is. So If you want to know what an authentic sanctuary is, let's talk about some of the ways that an authentic sanctuary is differentiated from a marine park, an entertainment park, an aquarium, a zoo, or a place that just calls themselves a sanctuary. First of all, a sanctuary, an authentic sanctuary, is a place to live, but also a place to thrive. The idea here is to provide an environment that the animals can flourish in, where resident well-being and individualized lifetime care are the priorities, where we promote autonomy as well as much of a natural life as possible, where you can do authentic education, authentic conservation, and be completely transparent with the public and the scientific community about what is going on, because there's nothing to hide. The whole purpose of a sanctuary is to let people know why these animals don't belong in concrete tanks and why they need to be moved to an ocean environment. Of course, an authentic sanctuary is also sustainable with the environment and financially, and is located in a community that embraces the sanctuary mission. Now, if you're going somewhere around the world and you're doing an eco tour, and you can see dolphins, if you can swim with or feed the dolphin, for instance, that's not a sanctuary. They may tell you it is, but it's not. In authentic sanctuaries, there are no performances, no breeding, no swim with or feeding programs, and no unnecessary invasive procedures that are not necessary above and beyond what's needed to make sure that the animals are healthy. So I wanted to mention this because it's really important, because as sanctuaries for cetaceans become more popular, there'll be a lot of facilities saying they're sanctuaries, but they're not. I also want to mention that we are working with a group of people to develop accreditation standards for authentic sanctuaries. That will be guidelines that can be used to accredit authentic cetacean sanctuaries. These places call themselves sanctuaries, but they are not. And they are photographs from the websites of various places around the world that say they are dolphin sanctuaries. And everything you see in these photos tells you that they are not dolphin sanctuaries. So as I mentioned, the Whale Sanctuary Project was founded in 2016. Our mission is to establish a gold standard seaside sanctuary where captive whales from entertainment can live in an environment that maximizes well-being and autonomy and is as close as possible to their natural habitat. Besides myself, we have 4 other directors: Charles Vinnick, who is our executive director as well. We have Naomi Rose, who you just heard from, Dave Phillips, executive director of the Earth Island Institute, and Carl Safina, renowned ecologist. We also have 50 plus advisors across the globe in a wide range of fields necessary and relevant to the task. So although, I think I'll show this 5 minutes and then get back to what I'm presenting. I'd like to just present a 5-minute film. This is Whales Without Walls. It's a film that we made a couple of years ago. It's won numerous awards, and it tells the whole story and shows the whole story of why the Whale Sanctuary Project was founded and what we hope to do. So please just watch, and I'll be back with you in no more than 5 minutes.
I've had many experiences with orcas off the south coast of Iceland. And there you got to see them in their natural environment. You got to see them majestic in every way. They're wide-ranging predators, traveling 100 miles a day and diving as much as 300 feet to forage. And they live in tightly knit family groups, often not leaving their birth family the whole lives. And in many of these families, the moms call all the shots.
We're talking about a level of emotional bonding that is beyond the par of what we experience as humans. Feelings and emotions come into play in orca and cetacean psychology in a very intense and very fundamental way. They have culture, they have dialects, they have interesting communication systems and a big brain. They're right up there with us. When you look at the orca brain through an MRI image, the neocortex, the thinking part of the brain, the gray matter, is actually more convoluted than that of the human brain. For a brain like that, there is nothing to do in a concrete tank.
There are actually 3,000 whales and dolphins in captivity around the world. There are 57 orca, more than 300 beluga, and they live in very small tanks, often not any deeper than the whales are long.
A concrete tank is like an auditory hall of mirrors. At first, they're going to get back a lot of echoes, and eventually, they're going to realize there's nothing to echolocate on. And at that point, they simply shut down.
And in captivity, they live in artificial families. Mothers and calves are separated based solely on commercial interest. Captive whales rarely live more than 20 years. Fewer than 50% lived more than 4 years after capture. The captive industry makes the point that they're providing education about orcas to all of their audiences.
I think it's anti-educational. It teaches kids that we as humans should dominate them, as opposed to anything about what they are as animals, what their culture is.
The reason China and other countries are capturing orcas and other cetaceans and putting them in concrete tanks is because of the success of marine parks in this country.
One could lose hope. One could say there are more and more animals being captured, and the numbers we have today will be nothing compared to what could happen in the future. But we have to put our hope in children to stand up and say no, and will demand of their parents, no matter where they live on the planet, that we treat these animals with understanding and care and keep them in the wild. As the public ethic around keeping whales and dolphins in captivity changes, people are demanding that the shows stop and that the animals have an opportunity to live in more natural environments. Most of the animals today in captivity were born in captivity. So releasing them would be in many ways tragic because they do not have the skills to survive in the wild. The best solution is to build natural seaside sanctuaries where captive whales and dolphins can live in an environment as close to their natural habitat as we can provide. They'll have a sandy bottom with critters, fish, and crabs with whom to interact. They'll have birds on the surface to chase. And they will have space, more than 300 times more than the largest performance tank in captivity.
The captivity industry is looking at us. The public has the power to end this suffering.
Sanctuaries have been built for elephants, for gorillas, and big cats. And now is the time to create sanctuaries for whales and dolphins.
There is another way. Here it is. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Now I want to get right into the whale sanctuary project and give you some exciting updates on this. As I mentioned, last February, we were in Halifax and we made an announcement that we chose Port Hilford in Nova Scotia, on the eastern shore of Nova Scotia, as the site for the first North American sanctuary, oceanside sanctuary for belugas and possibly orcas. And here's a map of Nova Scotia. Many people have not been there. It's an absolutely beautiful province. And you can see where Port Hilford is in relation to the largest city there, which is Halifax. Here's a closer up satellite image of Port Hilford. It's a big, beautiful bay open to the ocean. There's a beach at the head. Very few homes and facilities anywhere around there. And you can see the area that we have labeled our sanctuary site, because that is going to be where a sanctuary is going to be created. So here's a close-up of the first seaside sanctuary for belugas and orcas in North America. And we will be, and we are working now towards the design of the facility and construction. So we're well on our way. So let me give you some specifics of the whale sanctuary project. This is going to be a netted off areas of about 100 acres. So if you think about the largest tank at SeaWorld, this is going to be over 200 times larger and at least 100 times larger than the largest performance tank anywhere in the world. We're talking about orders of magnitude difference in space between what the largest tank can offer these animals and what we can offer. And the depths are going to be up to 18 meters and variable. They're not going to be just one depth throughout. It's going to be up and down, and it'll be a natural sandy bottom with fish and other animals, and they'll be able to move in and out of the sanctuary space. We project that we will have carrying capacity for about 8 belugas and 3 to 4 orcas, and they will be kept separated. But we will also have full service on-site veterinary care, training and husbandry staff, and security. We will also have an interpretive center where we will do education and outreach. And while the public will not be allowed to be close to the animals, there will be hiking trails for long distance viewing. So the Whale Sanctuary Project is basically replicating all the good things about the captivity industry. But we're doing more. We're going beyond that. We are providing expert human care in a natural environment. So in marine parks, these animals do have 24/7 veterinary care, protection, security. They're fed. They do education, outreach, science, and conservation. We are going to be doing all of that. But we are also going to be replacing some of the really stressful components of living in a tank with a less stressful environment. Instead of physical confinement, there'll be lots of space and depth. There will be no crowding. The noise will be a natural soundscape. There'll be plenty to echolocate on because there'll be lots of animals coming through the nets. We will promote the autonomy of the animals, and they will be able to explore for pretty much the first time in their life, since there's really nothing to explore in a concrete tank. So these are some of the things that we're going to be offering: community outreach, animal care, veterinary services, and internship programs, marine ops, all the sciences. And we plan for our first residents to join us by the end of next year. And we hope that you will join us in supporting our effort and going to www.whalesanctuary.org and finding out everything that we're doing, who's on the team. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at info@whalesanctuary.org. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and take any questions.
Yeah, lovely. I just want to first thank you so much for that super powerful presentation, Dr. Marino. And as you said, we'll now head into the Q&A session.
Okay.
I just want to remind folks to use the Q&A box to send your questions in. As of now, we got a lot of really great questions. So first, someone asked, you had said that there are some diseases that are more common in captive cetaceans than in the wild. Specifically, which ones are those?
Well, there are some bacterial infections that are more frequent in captivity than in the wild. And what is interesting is that although pneumonia and other lung diseases are common in free-ranging situations, it still begs the question of why living in a closed environment where the water is filtered and chlorinated and oxygenated, and there's 24/7 veterinary care, why are these animals getting these opportunistic infections?
Absolutely. So our next question is it possible for whales that have lived their lives in concrete tanks to be able to be released and adapt into the wild over time? Or has the lifestyle of the tanks changed the orca's lifestyle to become dependent on people feeding them and being isolated permanently so they can never be released into their natural habitat at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one we get all the time. And while it would be great to be able to say, well, we can take these animals who have been in captivity for 30 years, or those who were born into captivity and release them, that's not feasible. And the reason it's not is because for those born in captivity, there's no family group or social group to release them to. They don't have the survival skills needed to feed themselves. And it really would be a death sentence to put them out in the wild. So that's why sanctuaries are the next best thing and the best alternative to tanks. We're trying to get them as close as possible to the kind of environment that their brain and their body needs to thrive, but there will still be full human care and enrichment.
Sure. Okay, our next question is, are tourism activities like whale watching going to be allowed in these sanctuaries?
Whale watching, it depends on what you call whale watching. So as I mentioned, what we will be doing is we'll have an interpretive center. It'll be close to the area, but not anywhere near where the animals are. And we are planning a hiking trail with scopes high up so that the public can view the animals from a distance. So we're not going to be doing anything that brings the public up close to the animals for obvious reasons. This is a sanctuary. It's all about the whales. It's not about the people, but they will still get a chance to see them. We're going to have a webcam streaming in from below the water into the interpretive center, into classrooms, museums, even people's homes. And people can check out what beluga whales are doing on any given day and what they do when they're allowed to do whatever they want to do.
Thank you. All right, our next question. Someone actually lives on Vancouver Island in Canada, and they're wondering if there's any way they can get involved, either locally or in Halifax.
If they can get involved, send me an email on info@whalesanctuary.org. I answer all of my email questions, and let me know who you are, and we'll chat.
Lovely. So our next question, will young cetaceans born in the sanctuary not be releasable for the same reason those moved into the sanctuary are not releasable?
Well, as I mentioned, we won't be breeding in the sanctuary. No authentic sanctuary breeds. So if you go somewhere and you can take a photo with a baby tiger, it's not a sanctuary, that's a zoo. You can't breed. And the reason you can't breed is you don't want to make more individuals in captivity. A sanctuary is still captivity. Make no mistake about it. The last thing you want to do is keep that population going. The idea is to phase out the concrete tanks and then eventually to phase out the need for sanctuaries. So there won't be any reproduction. The animals will be on chemical birth control.
And so our next question, when do you think you may have orcas actually at the sanctuary?
Well, the idea of orcas is something that is a big leap for a lot of the people in Nova Scotia, especially in the community. We really are looking for belugas first. And eventually down the line, once we get everything going, if orcas present themselves, then we may look into that. But because we don't have the candidate animals now, I can't say for sure. It could be sooner than we think, or it could be, several years down the road. It's all a matter of which animals become available, which facilities want to work with us, and all of that, and who's a good candidate too.
So is the ultimate goal of the sanctuary project to have no sanctuaries in the future because there will no longer be a need?
Exactly. We want to put ourselves out of business. Now, as I mentioned, there are over 3,000 dolphins and whales in the entertainment business around the world. So we are not going to single-handedly put them out of business. What we're going to do is provide a gold standard, high quality alternative and work with others to create more of them so that it becomes the alternative that one goes to instead of the concrete tanks.
All right, so our next question says, thank you so much, Dr. Marino. This is really incredible. How will orcas and belugas be separated? Also, is there any plan for cetaceans who have only been in captivity for a short period of time to be reintroduced into the wild? Thank you again.
Thank you. So first question is, how will orcas and belugas be separated? Well, when you think about it, we've got over 100 acres to work with. That's huge. It's, again, orders of magnitude bigger than any tank anywhere in the world. And so we have the space to separate them with nets in whatever configuration we want. And we would, of course, separate them because normally we would want to make sure that, the belugas and the orcas who may not have any experience with the other species aren't stressed by that. But we would clearly be able to do that with nets. And then the second question was,
I can pull it up right here. Specifically, is there a plan for cetaceans who have only been in captivity for a short period of time?
Okay, so that brings up a very, very interesting question of whether or not we can do rehab and release. And of course, we will have at the sanctuary all the quarantine tanks, all the veterinarians, all the veterinary staff, all of the facilities needed to take in an injured whale, a free-ranging whale, rehabilitate that animal and then release them if possible. So that's the scenario that we envision we would participate with other rescues in the Maritimes, is having a facility that can accommodate an injured beluga whale or some other kind of cetacean, providing medical care, rehabilitation, and then release back out to their social group.
Great. So our next question, where are your first residents coming from? And how do you negotiate whales being brought into the sanctuary?
Well, you negotiate them very carefully. I don't know yet. We don't have specific whales identified yet. We have a number of lines of dialogue open with facilities around the world who have beluga whales and orcas, and we are discussing these issues with them. It's really important for people to know that this is the kind of thing that has to happen in collaboration with a marine park, with an entertainment park, because there's so much that has to happen to prepare the animals to go to sanctuary that we literally could not do it without the involvement of the staff at the place where they're coming from. So we have always invited collaboration with those who have animals, and we leave open. We leave the door open for conversation.
All right, so it's 2:46, so we probably have time for a couple more questions. The next question is, what can we as individuals do to advocate for sanctuaries like this one, especially in places like China, where whale captivity seems to be increasing?
Yeah, in China, whale captivity marine parks are opening up everywhere. There are over 70 marine parks in China and going up. And there are a number of advocate organizations in China working against this. Well, you can educate your friends about what happens to these animals in tanks and the alternatives that are coming online, and send them to our website, and I'm happy to talk to them and give them more information about, what the welfare of these animals is in the tanks, and the kinds of things that we have plans in the sanctuary.
Fabulous. And I think we have time for one more question. So what kinds of relationships will the Whale Sanctuary Project be engaging in, if any, with the Native communities in Nova Scotia?
Great question. We have a close relationship with the Mi'kmaq, who are the indigenous people. In fact, we've had several meetings with the leaders of the Mi'kmaq in that region. We are working with them to develop ways to include their culture in the presentation of the sanctuary, that the sanctuary has meaning within their culture. And they have been extremely important partners in this domain. So we are working very closely with them.
Lovely. Okay, so we have 2 minutes left. Dr. Marino, do you think you can answer one more question in a minute flat? Okay. Then our next question here is, will the whales or orcas be tagged with transmitters so they can be followed and trackable?
Well, we don't anticipate tagging them because they won't be released. So we won't need to track them in that way. We will have observers, staff, and lots of people on site watching the animals and videotaping them and knowing where they are at all times. So, but we won't have need for that kind of thing.
Great. And would that be the case also for animals that are rehabilitated, that short-term kind of whale that we were talking about?
That wouldn't be up to us. That would be up to the folks of the Maritimes and the province and whatever protocols they have for conservation, rehab, and release of marine mammals.
Well, thank you so much for this amazing presentation and sharing your unique expertise on such an important topic.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving us a forum and for a forum for all aquatic animals, and appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.